You feel it, don't you? That quiet frustration. The sense that no matter how hard you work, it never quite multiplies. You push, you grind, you stay disciplined, and yet the results feel linear. Effort in, effort out, like running on a treadmill that never actually takes you anywhere. But here's the truth most people never hear. The truth hidden behind polished success stories and filtered lifestyles. Hard work alone doesn't create wealth. Leverage does. And in this audiobook, The Leverage Secret, you're about to discover what separates those who chase money from those who multiply it. Because the wealthy are not playing the same game. They are not trading time for survival. They are not relying on effort alone. They are not hoping things will eventually work out. They are using something invisible, something powerful, something scalable. Leverage. In this audiobook, you will learn how leverage really works in today's world. Not theory, not outdated ideas, but practical modern leverage built on technology, systems, people, and mindset. We're going to break this into a journey, chapter by chapter. You'll discover why effort without leverage keeps you stuck, how to turn small actions into exponential outcomes, the 4 forms of leverage that quietly build wealth behind the scenes, how to shift from earning to multiplying, and most importantly, how to start applying it, even if you're starting from zero. But before we go further, understand this clearly. This is not financial advice. This is not a promise of instant wealth. This is education, awareness, perspective. Because leverage doesn't reward impatience. It rewards clarity. Here's a line I want you to remember. Money grows for those who stop chasing it and start positioning it. Let that sit for a moment, because if you truly understand that, everything changes. Now pause and ask yourself something honestly. How many hours have you worked this year? And how many of those hours are still paying you today? That question alone reveals everything. If this already resonates with you, take a moment later to like this audiobook or comment the word leverage to lock in the mindset shift. Not for the algorithm, but as a signal to yourself that you're ready to think differently. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Effort. There is a belief that has been repeated so often it feels like truth. Work harder, stay consistent, put in more hours, and eventually you'll succeed. But what if that belief is incomplete? What if effort alone is not the answer? Look around. There are people working 12-hour days, still struggling. There are people juggling multiple jobs, still stuck. There are people doing everything right and still not moving forward. So what's missing? Leverage. Because effort without leverage is limitation. It's like pushing a car uphill instead of driving it. You can push harder, you can push longer, but without leverage, you're still pushing. The wealthy understand something different. They don't just ask, how hard can I work? They ask, how can this work without me? That question changes everything, because now the goal is no longer effort, it's multiplication. Think about this carefully. If you earn money by trading your time, your income is capped. There are only 24 hours in a day. No matter how disciplined you are, no matter how focused you become, you cannot escape that limit. And that's where most people stay trapped, not because they're lazy, not because they lack ambition, but because they're playing a game with built-in limits. Leverage removes those limits. Leverage allows one action to create many outcomes, one idea to reach thousands, one system to run continuously, one decision, to compound over time. That's the shift, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice it everywhere. A video posted once, generating income for years. A business system, running while the owner sleeps. An investment, growing without daily attention. That's not luck. That's leverage. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Most people don't avoid leverage because it's complicated. They avoid it because it requires a different way of thinking. It requires patience. It requires discipline. It requires letting go of immediate rewards for exponential outcomes. And that's where most people stop. Because spending feels easier than investing. Working feels safer than building systems. Staying busy feels more productive than thinking strategically. But busy is not the same as effective. Let me say that again. Busy is not the same as effective. You can fill your entire day with activity and still not create anything that multiplies. That's the illusion. And breaking that illusion is the first step. Now imagine two people, same city, same opportunities, same starting point. One works hard, spends most of what they earn, repeats the cycle. The other works hard, but begins to deploy part of their income into systems, assets, opportunities. 5 years pass, 10 years pass, 15 years pass. Their lives no longer look the same. Not because one worked harder, but because one used leverage. That's the difference. And here's the deeper truth. Leverage is not just about money, it's about thinking. Because before you can multiply results, you have to multiply perspective. You have to stop asking, how can I do more? And start asking, how can this do more without me? That question will challenge you. It will slow you down at first. It will force you to think differently, but that's where the transformation begins. Because the moment you stop being the center of every outcome, you start building something that can grow beyond you, and that is where real power lives. Now take a breath, because in the next chapter, we're going deeper. We're going to break down the first form of leverage, the one most people misunderstand completely, and the one that quietly determines whether your money disappears or multiplies. Dear friends, we've just started working on this channel, so we'd really appreciate your support. Please like the video and leave a few words in the comments. It'll really help us promote it. We'd be very grateful. Let's keep going. Chapter 2. Money is not wealth. It's potential. Let's break something right now before it limits you for years. Money is not wealth. It looks like it. It feels like it. But it isn't. Money is potential, and most people waste that potential without realizing it. Think about the last time money entered your life. A paycheck, a payment, a bonus. What was your first thought? Be honest. Was it, what can I buy? Or was it, how can this grow? Because that single question determines everything. Most people are trained quietly, repeatedly, to consume first. They earn, then they spend. They celebrate income by removing it. And then they wonder why nothing accumulates. But the wealthy see money differently. They don't see it as a reward. They see it as a worker. Every dollar has a job. And if that dollar is not producing, it is underperforming. Let that idea settle, because it's uncomfortable at first. We've been taught to enjoy money, to use it, to spend it, but not to deploy it. And that's the difference between living paycheck to paycheck and building something that grows beyond you. There's a line buried deep inside the mindset of those who understand leverage. Money that sits shrinks. Money that moves multiplies. Now pause. Look at your current financial habits, not with judgment, but with awareness. How much of your money is working and how much is simply gone? Because here's the truth most people avoid. Spending feels like progress, but it's often just motion. Real progress comes from positioning. Let's imagine something simple. Two people earn the same amount. Same salary, same lifestyle options. One spends 90% of what they earn. The other spends 60% and deliberately positions the remaining 40% into assets, systems, and opportunities. Not perfectly, not aggressively, just consistently. 1 year passes, nothing dramatic. 3 years pass, still subtle. But by year 5, something begins to shift. One person is still dependent on the next paycheck. The other starts seeing income arrive without direct effort. And here's the important part. It doesn't feel like magic. It feels like momentum. Because leverage compounds quietly. It doesn't scream in the beginning. It whispers. Small decisions, repeated consistently. Building something invisible at first. This is why most people miss it. Because we are conditioned to chase visible rewards, fast results, immediate feedback, quick wins. But leverage doesn't operate on that timeline. It rewards patience with acceleration later. Now let's go deeper. Money becomes leverage when it is placed into something that can produce more than it consumes. That could be an asset, a system, a piece of content, a business process, an idea scaled through technology. But the key principle remains the same. You are not using money, you are assigning it a task. And that task must lead to multiplication. This doesn't require millions, it requires intention. Because leverage is not about how much you start with, it's about how consistently you apply the principle. Even small amounts, directed correctly, can build momentum, but only if you resist the urge to consume everything you earn. That's the internal battle. Because spending is emotional. It feels good, it feels deserved, and in many cases, it is. But here's the question that separates outcomes. Do you want temporary satisfaction or long-term leverage? There is no right answer, only different results. Now here's something most people don't realize. You don't lose money only when you spend it. You lose opportunity. Every dollar spent is not just gone. It's a version of growth that never happened. That trip, that impulse purchase, that upgrade you didn't need. Individually, they seem small, but collectively, they represent momentum that never started. Now, this is not about guilt. This is about awareness. Because once you see money as potential, you begin to treat it differently. You slow down before spending. You think before reacting. You start asking better questions. Not, can I afford this? But what is this costing me in future leverage? That question alone will change your decisions and, over time, your entire trajectory. Now, let's make this practical. You don't need to eliminate enjoyment. You don't need to become extreme. But you do need to create a system where part of everything you earn is automatically positioned for growth. Not saved, not stored, deployed. There's a difference. Saving protects money. Deploying multiplies it. And leverage lives in multiplication. So from this moment forward, start seeing money differently, not as an end, but as a beginning. Because every dollar is a decision, and every decision either builds your future or delays it. Now take a moment, let this settle, because in the next chapter, we're going to reveal the 4 engines of leverage, the ones operating quietly behind every scalable success story the ones most people overlook, and the ones that, once understood, will completely change how you approach growth, income, and opportunity. This is where things start to expand. This is where effort turns into systems, and systems turn into freedom. Chapter 3. The Four Engines of Leverage. There are forces in this world, quiet, invisible forces, that determine who stays stuck and who accelerates. Most people never see them clearly. They feel the results, but they don't understand the mechanism. And because they don't understand it, they can't control it. But once you do, once you truly see it, you start to notice leverage everywhere. Not as luck, not as coincidence, but as a system. There are four core engines of leverage, four ways effort becomes exponential, and every form of scalable success is built on at least one of these, often all four. Let's break them down, not as theory, but as something you can begin to recognize in your own life. The first is leverage of money. You've already started to understand this. Money, when positioned correctly, becomes a multiplier. It enters a system and returns more than it left with. It works without your direct involvement. This is the simplest form to understand and the hardest to master emotionally, because it requires you to delay consumption for multiplication, and most people never get past that point. But this is only the beginning. The second form, leverage of people. Now this is where things expand faster, because when you involve other people, you multiply effort instantly. Think about it. One person working alone has limited output, but a team, a network, a system of coordinated effort, now the output scales. This doesn't mean managing hundreds of people. It can be as simple as collaboration, delegation, building systems where others contribute value and you share in the outcome. This is how businesses grow. This is how ideas spread. This is how movements form. But here's the key insight. Leverage of people is not about control. It's about alignment. Because if people are aligned with a shared outcome, effort multiplies naturally. And if they're not, everything breaks down. So this form of leverage requires something deeper: clarity, communication, trust. It's not mechanical, it's human. The third form, leverage of technology. This is the most powerful engine of the modern world and the most misunderstood, because people use technology every day, but they don't use it as leverage. They use it as consumption, scrolling, watching, reacting. But technology, when used intentionally, becomes a multiplier. One piece of content reaching thousands. One system running continuously. One idea distributed globally. You don't need to be technical. You need to be strategic, because technology removes friction. It allows one action to be repeated, amplified, scaled. And this is where exponential growth begins. Not because you work harder, but because your work continues without you. Now pause and reflect. How much of your current use of technology is consumption and how much is creation? Because that ratio quietly shapes your future. The fourth form, leverage of systems. This is the most overlooked and the most powerful over time. A system is something that runs whether you feel like it or not. It removes decision fatigue. It removes inconsistency. It replaces effort with structure. Think about habits, routines, processes, automations. All of these are systems, and once a system is in place, it produces results repeatedly. Without constant attention, that's leverage, because now you are no longer relying on motivation. You are relying on design, and design scales. Now here's where it all comes together. The most powerful outcomes happen when these four forms combine: money deployed into systems, systems powered by technology, technology amplified through people. That's where real multiplication lives. But most people never reach that level. Not because they can't, but because they never shift their thinking. They stay focused on effort instead of structure. They stay focused on activity instead of leverage. And because of that, they stay in cycles that feel productive but never scale. Now, I want you to do something simple. Think about your current life, your work, your income, your habits. Which of these four forms of leverage are you actually using, and which ones are completely missing? Don't judge it, just notice it. Because awareness is the beginning of change. And here's the truth. You don't need all four immediately. You just need to start with one shift, one system, one decision. That begins to multiply. Because once you feel that shift, once you see even a small result from leverage, your thinking changes permanently. You stop chasing effort and you start building engines. Now take a breath, because in the next chapter, we're going to confront something that silently destroys leverage before it even begins. A mindset that feels normal, but guarantees limitation. And once you see it, you'll realize why so many people stay stuck, even when they're working harder than ever. Chapter 4. The Comfort Trap That Kills Leverage. There is something quietly holding most people back. It doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't feel like failure. In fact, it feels safe, predictable, familiar, comfortable. And that's exactly why it's so powerful. Because comfort kills leverage, not instantly, not dramatically, but slowly, consistently, invisibly. Let me explain. Leverage requires one thing most people avoid: delayed reward. You act now, but the result comes later. You build now, but the payoff compounds over time. And that gap between effort and outcome, that's where most people quit. Because in that space, there is uncertainty. No immediate feedback, no instant validation, no clear signal that it's working. Just silence. And the human mind hates silence. So what do most people do? They return to comfort. They go back to what feels productive, even if it doesn't multiply. Busy work, routine tasks, instant gratification, things that give quick feedback, but no long-term growth. This is the trap, because it doesn't feel like you're failing. It feels like you're doing something, but you're not building anything that scales. Now think about your own life. Be honest. How often do you choose what's comfortable instead of what compounds? Scrolling instead of studying, spending instead of investing, reacting instead of building. These decisions seem small, but they stack day after day, week after week, year after year, and eventually they create a life that feels stuck. Not because you didn't work hard, but because you stayed within comfort. Here's the truth. Most people never say out loud. Comfort is expensive, not in the moment, but in the future it removes. Every time you choose comfort over leverage, you're not just staying the same. You're delaying growth. You're postponing momentum. You're choosing linear over exponential. And the cost of that decision is invisible until it's too late. Now here's where it gets deeper. Comfort doesn't always look like laziness. Sometimes it looks like responsibility. You tell yourself, I'll focus on leverage later. Right now, I just need stability. I'll start building when things calm down. But things never calm down. Life always has demands. There will always be responsibilities. And if you wait for the perfect moment, you'll wait forever. Leverage is built inside real life, not outside of it. Now let's shift this, because this is not about removing comfort entirely. It's about redefining it. True comfort is not ease, it's control. It's knowing that your systems are working, even when you're not. It's knowing that your money is moving, even when you're resting. It's knowing that your effort yesterday is still producing today. That's real comfort, but to reach that level, you have to go through a phase of discomfort. You have to act without immediate reward. You have to build without constant validation. You have to trust the process before the results appear. And that's where discipline enters. Not loud discipline, not forced motivation, but quiet consistency. The kind that shows up even when nothing is happening. The kind that continues even when results are invisible, because leverage rewards that kind of mindset. Now, remember something important. You don't need massive action. You need consistent direction, small, repeated decisions that move you toward leverage every day, not perfectly, but intentionally. And over time, those decisions stack. They compound. They create momentum until one day, what felt slow becomes unstoppable. Now pause here, because this moment matters. Ask yourself one question. Where in your life are you choosing comfort? Instead of leverage, don't rush the answer. Sit with it, because that awareness is the turning point. And in the next chapter, we're going to take this even further. We're going to break down the difference between income and ownership, a distinction that most people completely misunderstand. And the reason why high earners often stay trapped, while others quietly build freedom. This is where the game truly shifts. We're so glad you decided to watch our video. We're also really curious to know which cities around the world are watching our videos. Could you let us know which city, or at least which country, you're from? We always read every comment under our videos carefully. Thank you. Chapter 5, Income versus Ownership, the Hidden Divide. There is a line, invisible, but absolute. Most people never see it. They spend their entire lives on one side, believing they're progressing, believing they're building something, but they never cross over. That line is the difference between income and ownership. And once you understand it, you begin to see why so many high earners still feel trapped. Let's break this clearly. Income is what you earn when you work. Ownership is what pays you when you don't. That's it. Simple, but powerful. And yet, completely misunderstood. Because society celebrates income, promotions, salaries, bonuses, titles. Everything is built around earning more. And there's nothing wrong with that. But here's the problem. Income alone does not create freedom. It creates dependence. Because the moment you stop working, the income stops. That's the trade. Time for money. And no matter how high the income becomes, that trade still exists. Now think about that. You can double your salary, triple it, even multiply it 10 times. But if it still depends on your time, you are still inside the same system, just at a higher level. That's why you see it everywhere. People earning more than they ever imagined, still stressed, still busy, still unable to step away because they increased income but never built ownership. Now let's flip this. Ownership is different. Ownership means you have something that produces value, independently of your direct effort, an asset, a system, a structure that continues even when you're not actively involved. This is where leverage lives, because ownership disconnects income from time. And once that connection breaks, everything changes. Now, don't misunderstand this. Ownership does not eliminate effort, it redirects it. Instead of working for money, you work to build something that generates money. That's a different game, and it requires a different mindset. Because in the beginning, ownership feels slower. You put in effort, and the return is not immediate. You build, and nothing seems to happen. But underneath the surface, something is forming: momentum, structure, scalability. And over time, that begins to show. Now here's the key insight. Most people never transition from income to ownership because they never create space for it. They fill their entire lives with earning more hours, more responsibilities, more commitments, until there is no room left to build something that scales, and so they stay there, busy, productive, but limited. This is why leverage requires intention. You have to deliberately carve out time, not to earn, but to build, even if it's small, even if it's slow, because that space is where ownership begins. Now, let's go deeper. Ownership is not just about assets, it's about control. Control over your time, control over your output, control over your direction. When you own something that produces value, you are no longer reacting to life, you are shaping it. And that shift is everything. But it doesn't happen by accident. It happens through decisions, small ones, repeated consistently. Choosing to build instead of consume, choosing to create instead of react, choosing to invest instead of spend. These choices don't feel dramatic, but they are powerful because they move you from dependence to independence, from effort to leverage. Now here's something most people don't realize. You don't need to fully escape income to begin building ownership. You can do both. You can earn and build. You can maintain stability while creating leverage. In fact, that's the smartest way to start because it removes pressure. It allows you to think long-term. It gives you room to experiment without risking everything. But you must be intentional because if you're not, income will consume all your time and ownership will never begin. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself this. If you stopped working today, what would still produce value in your life? Not potential, not ideas, not plans, but actual systems that continue without you. Sit with that, because the answer to that question reveals your current level of leverage, and it also shows you where you need to grow. Now here's the shift. From this point forward, start thinking like an owner, even if you're just beginning, even if you're starting small, because ownership is not a destination, it's a mindset. And that mindset changes how you see everything: work, money, time, opportunity, all of it. Now take a breath, because in the next chapter, we're going to step into something even deeper: the psychology of multiplication, why some people instinctively build leverage, while others stay trapped in cycles, even when they know better. This is where the internal game begins. And once you understand it, you stop fighting yourself and start aligning with growth. Chapter 6. The psychology of multiplication. There is a silent war happening inside you, not outside, not in the market, not in the economy, inside your own thinking. Because leverage is not just a strategy. It is a mindset. And if your mindset is not aligned with multiplication, you will unconsciously destroy every opportunity to build it. Let's go deeper. Most people are conditioned for survival, not for growth. From a young age, you are taught to be careful, to avoid risk, to seek stability. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But here's the problem. Leverage requires a different internal operating system. It requires you to think beyond immediate safety and into long-term expansion. And that feels uncomfortable because your mind is designed to protect you, not to multiply you. So when you encounter opportunities that involve uncertainty, your instinct is to pull back, to hesitate, to delay, even when the opportunity is real, even when the logic makes sense. This is why knowledge alone is not enough. You can understand leverage intellectually and still not apply it because your psychology is not aligned with it. Now here's the shift. People who build leverage consistently think differently about three core things: time, risk, control. Let's start with time. Most people see time as something to spend. They trade it, they use it, they fill it. But people who understand leverage see time as something to invest. They ask, quote 17, that question alone transforms how you use your hours, because now you're not just completing tasks, you're building assets, even if they're small, even if they seem insignificant. Because over time, those small actions stack. They compound. They create something bigger than the individual effort. Now let's talk about risk. This is where most people get stuck because risk feels dangerous, unstable, unpredictable. But here's the truth. There are two types of risk: visible risk and invisible risk. Visible risk is what most people fear: trying something new, investing, building something uncertain. It feels uncomfortable. But invisible risk is what most people ignore, staying the same, relying only on income, avoiding leverage. That risk doesn't feel scary, but it compounds silently, year after year, until one day you realize nothing has changed, and that realization is far more dangerous. So the question is not, quote, 18. The question is, quote, 19, because doing nothing is also a decision. Now let's talk about control. Most people believe control means certainty, knowing exactly what will happen, having guaranteed outcomes, but leverage doesn't work that way. Leverage requires releasing some control to gain a different kind of control. Control over systems, control over direction, control over long-term outcomes. You may not control every step, but you control the structure. And structure creates stability over time. This is why people who build leverage are comfortable with uncertainty in the short term, because they trust the system. In the long term, that's a different level of thinking, and it takes time to develop. Now let's bring this together. If your mindset is focused on spending time instead of investing it, avoiding visible risk while accepting invisible risk, chasing certainty instead of building structure, you will struggle with leverage, not because you lack ability, but because your thinking is working against you. So what do? You start small. You don't try to change everything overnight. You begin by shifting awareness, catching your patterns, noticing your decisions, asking better questions. Every time you're about to spend time, ask, quote, 20. Every time you're about to avoid something uncomfortable, ask, quote, 21. Every time you feel the need for certainty, ask, quote, 22. These questions interrupt old patterns, and over time, they create new ones. Patterns aligned with leverage. Now here's something important. You don't need perfect clarity to begin. You need direction. Because clarity comes from movement, not from waiting. And as you start moving, even in small ways, your thinking begins to shift. You start seeing opportunities differently. You start valuing your time differently. You start making decisions that align with multiplication. And that's when everything changes. Not instantly, but inevitably. Now pause here, because in the next chapter, we're going to move from mindset into action. We're going to break down how to start building your first layer of leverage, even if you feel like you have nothing, no capital, no network, no experience, because leverage does not begin with resources. It begins with perspective. And once you see what's possible, you'll realize you've had more leverage available than you ever noticed. Chapter 7. Starting with nothing, or so you think. There's a story people tell themselves, underscore, quote, underscore 23, underscore. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough connections, not enough knowledge. And on the surface, it feels true. Because when you look at people who have already built leverage, it seems like they had something you don't. More resources, more access, more opportunity. But here's the reality most people never realize. Leverage does not begin with what you have. It begins with how you see. Because if you cannot recognize leverage in small forms, you will never build it in large ones. Let's break this illusion. You say you don't have money, but you have time. You say you don't have connections, but you have access. You say you don't have experience, but you have awareness. These may not feel like leverage, but they are the foundation of it, because every form of leverage starts small, almost invisible. Now think about this. In today's world, one idea can reach thousands. One skill can be shared globally. One system can run without your presence. This was not possible before, but now it is available to almost anyone. And yet, most people don't use it. Why? Because they're waiting for perfect conditions. They're waiting to feel ready. They're waiting for clarity. But leverage doesn't reward waiting. It rewards movement, even imperfect movement. Now, let's make this practical. If you truly had nothing, no time, no access, no tools, then yes, leverage would be difficult. But that's not your situation. Your situation is different. You have time, even if it's limited. You have access, even if it's underused. You have the ability to learn, even if you haven't yet. And that is enough, because the first layer of leverage is built from what you already have, not from what you wish you had. Now here's the key shift. Stop asking, quote underscore 24. Start asking, quote 25. That question changes everything, because it forces you to act instead of wait. Now let's go deeper. Your time is your first form of leverage, not in the way most people think. Not by working more hours, but by using your time to build something that lasts beyond the moment. Even 1 hour a day, used intentionally, can create momentum. That's not theory, that's reality. Because 1 hour, repeated consistently, becomes structure, and structure becomes leverage. This idea echoes something simple but powerful. Consistent focused time can reshape your entire trajectory. Now think about how most people use their time. Scrolling, reacting, consuming, hours disappear. with nothing to show for it, but if even a fraction of that time is redirected toward building, everything begins to shift. Now let's talk about access. You are connected to more information, more tools, more opportunities than any generation before you. But access alone is not leverage. Action is. Because knowledge without application is just potential, and potential does not multiply. Execution does. Now here's where most people hesitate. They think, quote, 26, quote, 27, quote, 28. But here's the truth. You're already spending time. The question is not whether you'll use time. The question is how. Will you use it to maintain your current life or to build a different one? Because every hour is a decision. Now let's shift again. Your mindset is also leverage because the way you think determines the actions you take, and the actions you take determine the systems you build. So even if you feel like you're starting with nothing, you're not. You're starting with perspective, and perspective is where leverage begins. Now, I want you to imagine something. What if you took just one small step today? Not toward earning more, but toward building something, not something perfect, not something massive, just something that exists beyond this moment. A piece of content, a simple system, a small investment of time into learning a scalable skill. Something, because that underscore underscore quote underscore 29 underscore underscore is the seed. And leverage always starts with a seed. It doesn't look impressive, it doesn't feel powerful, but over time, it grows. Now here's the truth most people miss. The difference between those who build leverage and those who don't is not resources, it's consistency. Because anyone can start, but not everyone continues. And leverage rewards those who stay, those who keep building even when results are slow, those who keep learning even when progress feels invisible, those who keep showing up without immediate validation. That's where momentum begins. And once momentum starts, everything accelerates. Now pause here, because this moment matters. You don't need to change everything. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to begin. One small action, one intentional decision, one step toward building instead of just maintaining. Because in the next chapter, we're going to go deeper into execution. We're going to break down exactly how to structure your time so that leverage becomes inevitable, not accidental. This is where awareness turns into action, and action turns into momentum. Chapter 8. Designing Time for Leverage. There's a misconception that quietly destroys progress before it even begins. People believe they need more time, more hours, more freedom, more space in their schedule. But the truth is, you don't need more time. You need better design. Because time, by itself, does nothing. It passes, whether you use it or not. It moves, whether you're building or drifting. And if you don't design how you use it, it will be consumed automatically by distractions, by obligations, by habits that lead nowhere. This is why most people feel busy, but never move forward. Their time is full, but not intentional. And leverage requires intention. Let's break this clearly. There are two ways to use time. You can spend it, or you can invest it. Spending time gives you immediate outcomes. You complete a task, you finish a job, you check something off. It feels productive. But once the task is done, the value stops. Investing time is different. You put in effort now, but the result continues later. You build something once, and it keeps producing. That's leverage. Now here's the shift. If most of your time is spent, you will always be working. If even a small portion of your time is invested, you begin to build momentum, and over time, that momentum replaces effort. So, the goal is not to eliminate spending time. It's to introduce investing time, even in small amounts. Now let's make this practical. You don't need 10 hours a day. You don't need a perfect schedule. You need one consistent block of focused time, dedicated to building 1 hour, fully intentional, no distractions, no multitasking, no reacting, just building. This idea may sound simple, but it is powerful, because 1 hour a day is not about the hour. It's about what that hour represents: consistency, direction, commitment, and over time, that hour compounds. Just like leverage itself, it builds something day after day until one day you realize that what you've been creating has value beyond your time. That's the shift. Now here's where most people fail. They don't protect that hour. They treat it like optional time, something they'll do if everything else is finished. But everything else is never finished. There is always more to do, more distractions, more noise, more reasons to delay. So that hour disappears, day after day, and with it, the opportunity to build leverage. So you have to treat that time differently, not as extra, but as essential, because that hour is where your future is built, not your job, not your routine. That hour. Now here's another layer. It's not just about time, it's about energy. Because you can have time, but no focus. You can sit down to build, but your mind is scattered, distracted, tired, unclear, and in that state, nothing meaningful happens. So you must also design your energy. Choose the time of day when you're most clear, most focused, most capable of deep work. For some, it's early morning. For others, it's late at night. It doesn't matter. What matters is consistency. Because when you consistently use your best energy for building, you accelerate everything. Now let's go deeper. What do you actually do in that time? You don't need complexity. You need direction. Focus on things that create future value, not immediate reward. Learning a skill that scales, creating something that can be reused, building systems that remove effort. These actions may not feel exciting. They may not give instant results, but they are seeds. And seeds take time to grow, but once they do, they produce more than you put in. That's leverage. Now think about this. If you invest 1 hour a day for 1 year, that's over 300 hours. 300 hours of focused building. Do you think that creates nothing? Of course not. It creates transformation, but only if you stay consistent. That's the key. Because most people start, but they don't continue. They get distracted, they lose focus, they return to comfort, and the momentum breaks. But if you stay, if you keep showing up, even when it feels slow, even when results are invisible, something powerful begins to happen. Progress compounds, clarity increases, confidence builds, and eventually, results appear. Not suddenly, but inevitably. Now here's a question for you. If you committed to 1 hour a day for the next year, what could you build? Don't overthink it. Just imagine. Because that vision is not as far away as it seems. It's just built 1 hour at a time. Now pause here, because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that quietly sabotages this entire process. Distraction. The hidden force that steals time, energy, and focus, without you even realizing it. And once you see how it works, You'll understand why so many people never build leverage, even when they know exactly what to do. If you like this audiobook, please give it a like. It will really help us promote the video. Chapter 9, The Silent Thief of Leverage. There is something quietly stealing your future, not in a dramatic way, not in a way that's obvious, but in small, almost invisible moments. Moments that feel harmless, moments that feel deserved, moments that feel like nothing. But together, they take everything. That force is distraction. And in today's world, distraction is not accidental. It is engineered, designed to capture your attention, hold it, and keep you consuming instead of creating. Now think about this honestly. How many times have you picked up your phone for quote 30 and lost an hour? How many times have you planned to focus but ended up reacting, scrolling, checking, switching, not because you wanted to, but because it pulled you in? That's not lack of discipline. That's exposure to constant interruption. And interruption destroys leverage, because leverage requires one thing above all else: focus. Deep, uninterrupted focus. The kind that allows you to build something meaningful, the kind that allows you to think clearly, the kind that allows you to create systems instead of just reacting to life. But distraction breaks that. It fragments your attention. It scatters your energy. It turns hours into noise. And over time, that noise replaces progress. Now here's the deeper truth. Distraction doesn't feel like loss. It feels like relief, a break, an escape, a moment of ease. But that relief comes at a cost, because every moment spent distracted is a moment not invested, not building, not learning, not creating, and that lost time does not come back. Now let's go deeper. Distraction is not just external, it's internal. It's the urge to check something, the impulse to switch tasks, the discomfort of staying focused, because when you sit down to build, you face resistance. It feels slow, it feels challenging, it feels uncertain, and your mind looks for an escape, something easier, something faster, something that gives instant feedback. That's the trap, because leverage lives on the other side of that resistance. And most people never cross it. They turn away too early. They switch tasks too quickly. They never stay long enough to create something meaningful. Now here's the shift. You don't need to eliminate distraction completely. That's unrealistic, but you do need to control it, especially during your building time. That 1 hour we talked about must be protected relentlessly. No notifications, no interruptions, no switching, just focus. Because that hour is where leverage is created. And if that hour is compromised, so is your progress. Now, let's make this practical. Before you begin your focus time, remove distractions. Put your phone away. Close unnecessary tabs. Create an environment that supports focus. Because willpower is not enough. You need structure, and structure makes focus easier. Now here's another layer. You must train your mind to stay, because in the beginning, it won't be easy. Your mind will wander. It will look for stimulation. It will try to pull you away. That's normal. But this is where discipline is built, not by forcing yourself aggressively, but by gently returning your focus again and again until it becomes natural. Because focus is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with practice. Now think about this. If you can focus deeply for even 1 hour a day without distraction, how much more could you create? How much faster could you build? How much clearer would your thinking become? That's the power of focus. And that's why distraction is so dangerous. Because it doesn't just take your time, it takes your potential. Now here's a powerful shift. Start seeing your attention as your most valuable asset, more valuable than money, more valuable than time, because attention determines how you use everything else. And if your attention is controlled by external forces, your life will be too. But if you take control of your attention, you take control of your direction. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, what is currently stealing your focus? Be specific, because awareness is the first step to reclaiming it. And once you do, everything changes. Now here's where this gets even more important, because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about momentum, how small, focused actions turn into unstoppable progress, and why once momentum begins, it becomes easier to continue than to stop. This is where leverage starts to feel real. This is where effort transforms into flow. And once you reach that point, you'll never want to go back. Chapter 10. Momentum, the force that changes everything. There is a moment, subtle, almost unnoticeable, when everything begins to shift. Not because something dramatic happened, not because of luck, not because of a breakthrough, but because of momentum. And most people misunderstand it. They think momentum comes after success, after results, after validation, after something proves that it's underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 31, underscore, underscore, but that's not how it works. Momentum comes first. Success follows it. Let me explain. In the beginning, everything feels heavy. Starting feels difficult. Consistency feels forced. Progress feels invisible. You sit down to build, and it feels like nothing is happening. Day after day, effort with little feedback. This is the phase where most people quit. Not because they lack ability, but because they lack momentum. And without momentum, everything feels harder than it should. But here's what they don't realize. They were closer than they thought. Because momentum builds quietly. It doesn't announce itself. It forms in repetition. Small actions, repeated consistently, begin to stack. And eventually, they reach a tipping point where things start to feel different, easier, smoother, more natural. That's momentum. And once it begins, everything accelerates. Now think about this. Have you ever tried to push something heavy? At first, it barely moves. You push harder, still slow, but then suddenly it starts to roll. And once it's moving, it requires less effort to keep it going. That's momentum. And leverage works the same way. In the beginning, you are pushing, building, learning, creating with little visible return, but if you stay consistent, momentum builds. And once it builds, your actions start to compound. Results begin to appear, not randomly, but predictably, because you've created movement. Now here's the key insight. Momentum does not require perfection. It requires consistency. You don't need to be the best. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to keep moving, because stopping breaks momentum, and restarting is always harder. This is why discipline matters, not as a concept, but as a practice. Showing up, even when you don't feel like it. Continuing, even when results are slow. Because every time you show up, you reinforce momentum, and every time you stop, you weaken it. Now let's connect this to leverage. Leverage amplifies momentum. Once you have systems in place, once you have assets working, once you have structure, momentum doesn't just continue, it multiplies. because now your past actions are supporting your present. Your previous work is still producing. Your effort is no longer isolated. It's connected. That's where exponential growth begins. Now imagine this. Instead of starting from zero every day, you start from progress, from accumulated effort, from systems already in motion. How much easier would that be? How much faster would you grow? That's the power of momentum combined with leverage. Now here's something important. Momentum is fragile in the beginning. It can be broken easily by distraction, by inconsistency, by doubt. So you must protect it, especially early on. You must treat your progress like something valuable, because it is, even if it doesn't look impressive yet. Now here's a question for you. What have you started and stopped before momentum could build? Think about it. Projects, habits, ideas, things you began with energy, but didn't continue, not because they couldn't work, but because they didn't show results fast enough. That's where most potential is lost, not in failure, but in stopping too soon. Now imagine if you had continued, if you had stayed consistent, if you had allowed momentum to build. Where would you be now? That realization is not meant to create regret. It's meant to create awareness. Because from this moment forward, you can choose differently. You can stay. You can continue. You can build momentum intentionally. Now let's make this practical. Choose one thing, not 10, not 5. One, something that can create future value, and commit to it daily, even if it's small, even if it feels insignificant, because consistency creates momentum, and momentum creates results. Now here's the shift. Stop chasing motivation. Start building momentum, because motivation fades. But momentum carries you forward. Now pause here, because in the next chapter, we're going to explore something that multiplies momentum even faster. Environment. The people, inputs, and surroundings that either accelerate your growth or quietly hold you back. And once you understand this, you'll realize that who and what surrounds you is not neutral. It's either pushing you forward or pulling you away. Chapter 11. Environment. The invisible force shaping your results. There is something influencing your life right now. Something subtle, something constant, something powerful. And most people never question it. Your environment. Not just where you live, but what you consume, who you listen to, what you normalize every single day. Because here's the truth. You don't operate independently. You absorb ideas, behaviors, standards, whether you realize it or not. And over time, those inputs shape your actions, and your actions shape your outcomes. Now think about this carefully. If your environment rewards comfort, you will choose comfort. If your environment normalizes distraction, you will become distracted. If your environment avoids growth, you will avoid growth. 2, not because you're weak, but because you're human. And humans adapt to their surroundings. This is why environment is leverage, because it multiplies behavior without constant effort. Now here's the shift. Most people try to change their results without changing their environment. They rely on willpower. They try to force discipline. They try to push themselves against everything around them. And eventually, they burn out, because environment always wins in the long run. So instead of fighting it, you design it. Now let's break this down. There are 3 layers of environment: physical, digital, social. Each one either supports your growth or slows it down. Let's start with the physical environment, your space. where you spend your time. Is it designed for focus or distraction? Is it organized or chaotic? Because your surroundings influence your behavior. A cluttered space creates a cluttered mind. A focused space supports focused work. This doesn't require perfection, just intention. Remove what distracts you. Add what supports you. Make it easier to build than to avoid building. Now the second layer, your digital environment. This is where most people lose control. Because your phone, your apps, your feeds, they are all competing for your attention. And if you don't control them, they will control you. Every notification, every scroll, every piece of content shapes your thinking, and most of it is not aligned with your growth. So you have to curate it intentionally. Follow people who build. Consume content that teaches. Limit what distracts. Because what you see daily becomes what you think about, and what you think about becomes what you act on. Now the third layer, your social environment. The people around you. This is the most powerful and the most overlooked, because people influence you more than you realize. Their mindset, their habits, their expectations, all of it becomes part of your reality. If you surround yourself with people who settle, you will feel pressure to settle. If you surround yourself with people who grow, you will feel pulled to grow. It's not about judging anyone, it's about awareness. Because proximity shapes perspective. Now here's the truth most people avoid. You don't rise above your environment, you rise with it. So if your environment is not aligned with leverage, you will struggle to build it. Not because you can't, but because everything around you is pulling you in a different direction. Now, here's the solution. You don't need to change everything at once. You start small. Adjust your space. Refine your inputs. Seek out better influences, even digitally, even indirectly, because today you can learn from people you've never met. You can surround yourself with ideas that challenge you, that push you, that expand your thinking, and over time, that becomes your new normal. Now imagine this. What if your environment constantly reinforced growth? What if everything around you supported leverage? What if the default was building, not consuming? How much easier would it be to stay consistent? How much faster would you grow? That's the power of environment. It reduces resistance. It amplifies action. It turns discipline into default behavior. Now pause for a moment. Look at your current environment, not emotionally, objectively. What is it encouraging? What is it reinforcing? And what needs to change? Because this is not a small adjustment. This is a foundational shift. And once you make it, everything else becomes easier. Now here's where we go next. Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that ties everything together: identity. Who you believe you are, and how that belief either unlocks leverage or keeps you stuck in cycles. Because at the deepest level, you don't rise to your goals. You fall to your identity, and once you understand that, you stop trying to force change and start becoming the person who naturally creates it. Chapter 12, Identity, the Root of Every Result. There is something deeper than strategy, deeper than discipline, deeper than knowledge, deeper than even leverage itself, and that is who you believe you are. Because no matter what you learn, no matter what tools you discover, no matter how powerful the strategy is, you will always act in alignment with your identity. Always. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you will find ways to struggle. If you see yourself as someone who is, quote, 32, you will stay in that pattern. If you see yourself as someone who builds, who grows, who multiplies, your actions will follow. That's the truth most people overlook. They try to change their results without changing their identity, and so the change never lasts because it's not rooted. Now let's go deeper. Identity is not what you say once. It's what you repeat daily through your actions, through your habits, through your decisions, because every time you act, you reinforce a belief about who you are. You don't become confident and then act. You act and then confidence forms. You don't become disciplined and then show up. You show up and then discipline builds. Identity is built from evidence, small pieces, repeated over time. Now here's where this connects to leverage. If your identity is based on effort, you will always default to working harder, more hours, more tasks, more activity, even when leverage is available, because that's who you believe you are. But if your identity shifts to someone who builds systems, who thinks in terms of multiplication, who values structure over effort, everything changes. Your decisions change, your focus changes, your priorities change, because now you're not just working, you're building. Now let's make this real. Think about how you currently describe yourself, not to others, to yourself. When you think about money, do you see yourself as someone who earns or someone who builds? When you think about time, do you see yourself as busy or intentional? When you think about growth, do you see yourself as trying or becoming? These subtle differences shape everything because your mind is constantly asking underscore underscore quote underscore 33 underscore underscore, and then it answers automatically. If your identity is unclear, your actions will be inconsistent. If your identity is weak, your discipline will break. But if your identity is strong, aligned with leverage, your actions become natural. Now here's the shift. You don't need to wait to become someone new. You start acting like that person now, in small ways, consistently, because identity is not something you declare. It's something you prove through repetition. Now imagine this. What would someone who understands leverage do with their time? How would they spend money? What would they focus on daily? Start there. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Because every small aligned action builds identity, and identity builds everything else. Now here's something important. You will feel resistance because your current identity will try to pull you back. It will say, quote, 34, quote, 35, quote, 36. That's normal because change feels uncomfortable. But that discomfort is a signal, a sign that you are shifting, growing, expanding. So don't run from it. Lean into it, because on the other side is a new version of you, one that doesn't chase leverage, but naturally creates it. Now pause here. Ask yourself one powerful question. Who do I need to become to build the life I want? Not what do I need to do? Who do I need to be? Because once that becomes clear, everything else aligns. Now here's where this goes next. Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about execution at a higher level. Not just starting, but scaling. How small systems turn into powerful engines. And how to expand what you've built without overwhelming yourself. This is where leverage becomes real, not just an idea, but a force you can feel. Friend, write your opinion on this topic in the comments. Do you agree with us or not? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Chapter 13. From building to scaling. There comes a point when what you've been building starts to work. Not perfectly, not massively, but noticeably. You begin to see signs, small results, consistent output, a system that doesn't completely rely on you. And in that moment, most people make a critical mistake. They go back to effort. They try to do more, manually, more work, more input, more control. But scaling is not about doing more. It's about expanding what already works. That's the difference, because building creates the foundation. Scaling multiplies it. Now let's go deeper. Scaling means this. You take something that produces value and you increase its reach without increasing your effort at the same rate. That's leverage in motion. But to do that, you need to understand one key principle. Not everything should be scaled. Only what works. This is where clarity matters, because many people try to scale too early. They build something once and immediately try to expand it without testing, without refining, without understanding what actually creates results. And so it breaks. Or worse, it never grows. So the first step in scaling is validation. Does this system produce value? Does it solve a problem? Does it create output? Does it work consistently? If yes, then you scale. If not, you refine, because scaling amplifies everything, including mistakes. Now here's the shift. Once something works, you don't rebuild it. You repeat it. You systemize it. You remove unnecessary steps. You simplify the process so that it can run with less effort. That's where leverage increases. Now let's make this real. Think about anything you've done successfully, even something small. A habit you maintained, a process that worked, a system that produced results. Instead of doing it randomly, you turn it into a repeatable structure, a system. Because once it's a system, it can be scaled. Now here's the next layer. Scaling often requires letting go. And this is where many people struggle, because they want control. They want to oversee everything. They want to be involved in every detail. But that limits growth, because your time is still the bottleneck. So to scale, you must remove yourself from certain parts of the process, not completely, but strategically. You design the system so it doesn't need you constantly. That's uncomfortable at first, because it feels like losing control. But in reality, you're gaining leverage. Now let's connect this to the 4 engines. When you scale, you often combine them. You use technology to automate. You involve people to expand effort. You use systems to maintain consistency. You deploy money to accelerate growth. This is where multiplication becomes powerful, because now you're not just building, you're expanding, and expansion creates opportunity. Now here's something important. Scaling is not about speed. It's about sustainability, because fast growth without structure leads to collapse. But steady scaling with strong systems leads to freedom. So don't rush it. Refine first, then expand. Now here's a question for you. What in your life is ready to be scaled? Not everything, just one thing. Something that already works. Something that already produces value. Because that's where you begin. You don't scale chaos, you scale clarity. Now let's go deeper. Scaling also requires perspective. You have to think beyond the immediate, beyond today's effort, beyond short-term results. Because scaling is about future impact. You're building something that continues, that grows, that multiplies, even when you're not directly involved. That's a different level of thinking, and it takes practice. But once you shift into it, everything changes. Now imagine this. Instead of starting from zero every day, you are expanding something that already exists. Instead of working harder, you are working smarter. Instead of chasing results, you are building systems that produce them. That's leverage at a higher level. Now pause here, because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something critical: fear, the internal resistance that appears right when you're about to grow, and how that fear quietly stops people from scaling even when everything is ready. Because understanding leverage is one thing, but moving through fear, that's where real transformation happens. Chapter 14. Fear, the barrier between knowing and doing. There is a moment right before growth, right before expansion, right before everything begins to change, and in that moment, something appears, not outside of you, inside. Fear, not loud, not obvious, but present. A quiet hesitation, a subtle doubt, a voice that says, "Wait, not yet. What if this doesn't work?" And that voice stops more progress than failure ever could. Because here's the truth. Most people don't fail because they tried and lost. They fail because they never fully moved. They paused, they hesitated, they held back, right when they were closest to scaling. Now let's understand this clearly. Fear is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a signal that something matters, that you're stepping into unfamiliar territory, that you're moving beyond your current identity. And your mind wants to protect you. It wants to keep you safe in what it knows, in what feels predictable, even if that place is limiting. That's the paradox, because safety can become a cage. Now think about this. Every time you've grown in life, there was fear. Trying something new, making a decision, taking a step forward. Fear was there, but so was progress. So the goal is not to eliminate fear, it's to understand it, to move with it, instead of being controlled by it. Now here's where it connects to leverage. Leverage requires decisions that don't have guaranteed outcomes. Building systems, investing time, scaling something new. There is always uncertainty, and fear lives in uncertainty. So if you wait until fear disappears, you will never act. Because it doesn't disappear, it evolves. Every new level comes with new uncertainty, new discomfort, new fear. So the question becomes, can you act anyway? Now let's break this down. There are 3 common fears that stop leverage. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of losing control. Let's start with failure. What if this doesn't work? This question stops people instantly. But here's the truth. Failure is not the opposite of leverage. It's part of it. Because every system, every strategy requires refinement, adjustment, learning. And that only comes through action. So if you avoid failure, you avoid feedback. And without feedback, you cannot improve. So instead of asking, what if this fails? Ask, what will I learn if it does? That shift removes pressure and creates movement. Now fear of judgment. What will people think? This one is powerful because humans are wired for approval. We want to be accepted, understood, respected, but growth often requires doing things that others don't understand, building something new, thinking differently, moving in a direction that's not common, and that can feel isolating. But here's the truth. Most people are too focused on their own lives to judge yours deeply. And even if they do, their opinion does not define your outcome. So the question becomes, do you want approval or progress? Because often you cannot have both at the same time. Now the third fear, loss of control. If I scale, if I grow, will I lose control? This is subtle because it feels logical. You want to manage everything, oversee everything, ensure everything is perfect. But as you learned in the previous chapter, scaling requires letting go. Not completely, but strategically. And that creates discomfort because it's unfamiliar. But here's the truth. You are not losing control. You are shifting it from effort to systems, from direct action to structure. And that is a higher level of control. Now let's bring this together. Fear is not your enemy. Avoidance is, because fear simply signals that you are at the edge of growth. And if you step back, you stay where you are. But if you move forward, even with uncertainty, you expand. Now here's something important. Courage is not confidence. It's action in the presence of fear. And every time you act, you weaken fear's control. You build evidence. You prove to yourself that you can move forward, even when it's uncomfortable. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, what am I avoiding right now? Because of fear? Be specific, because that answer points directly to your next level. Now imagine this. What if you moved forward anyway? Not perfectly, not without fear, but with intention. What would change? Because that decision is where leverage begins to expand. Now here's where we go next, because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about consistency at a deeper level, not just showing up, but staying aligned over time. Because starting creates potential, but consistency creates results. And once you understand how to maintain it, leverage becomes inevitable. Chapter 15, Consistency, the quiet power that builds everything. There is a truth most people avoid because it's not exciting, it's not dramatic. It doesn't look impressive in the moment, but it is responsible for nearly every meaningful result you see. Consistency, not intensity, not bursts of motivation, not occasional effort. Consistency, the quiet decision to keep going. Now let's be real for a moment. Anyone can start. Anyone can feel motivated for a day, a week, even a month. But very few people stay. And that's the difference. Because leverage does not reward beginnings. It rewards continuation. Let that sink in. You don't build leverage by starting something. You build it by not stopping, even when it feels slow, even when it feels repetitive, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because under the surface, everything is happening. Now think about this. A single action, done once, creates almost no impact. But the same action, repeated daily, becomes a force. Not because the action changed, but because it compounded. That's consistency. And that's where leverage grows. Now here's the problem. Most people are addicted to visible progress. They want to see results quickly. They want confirmation that it's working. They want proof before they commit. But leverage doesn't operate that way. It requires commitment before proof. And that's where most people fall off. They stop too early. They change direction too often. They chase new ideas instead of staying with one long enough to see it grow. Now here's the shift. Consistency is not about doing more. It's about doing the right thing repeatedly, with focus, with intention, without constant interruption. That's it. And over time, that becomes unstoppable. Now let's go deeper. Consistency is not just external. It's internal. It's how you think, how you respond, how you handle resistance. Because there will be days when you don't feel like continuing, days when it feels pointless, days when doubt appears, days when distraction wins. That's normal. But consistency is built in those moments, not when it's easy, but when it's not. Because every time you continue, despite resistance, you strengthen your identity. You reinforce your direction. You build momentum, and that momentum carries you forward. Now, here's something important. Consistency does not mean perfection. You will have off days. You will miss moments. You will feel out of rhythm sometimes. That's part of the process. But consistency is not about never breaking. It's about returning quickly, not letting one missed day become a missed week, not letting one distraction become a habit. You come back, you reset. Now think about this. Every hour you have is a lever. It can be spent or it can be invested. Every dollar you earn is a lever. It can disappear or it can multiply. Every decision you make is a lever. It can keep you where you are or move you forward. Nothing is neutral. Everything is either building or delaying. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Now here's the most powerful part. You don't need permission. You don't need approval. You don't need to wait. You already have everything required to begin. Time, attention, choice. And those three things, used correctly, become leverage. So from this moment forward, move differently. Not dramatically, but intentionally. When you wake up, choose direction. When you work, choose focus. When you earn, choose positioning. Small shifts, repeated daily, because in the end, this is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming aware of what you already have. Now let this line stay with you. Your life does not change when you work harder. It changes when your effort starts working for you. If this audiobook shifted something in you, even slightly, lock it in. Hit like as a commitment to yourself, not for the platform, but as a signal that you're choosing a different path. And in the comments, write one word, building, not for anyone else, but as a declaration that from this moment forward, you are not just working, you are building. And if you want to stay consistent on this journey, subscribe, not as a follower, but as someone who's committed to growth, awareness, and leverage. And if someone in your life is stuck in the same cycle you once were, share this with them, because sometimes one idea at the right time changes everything. Now, one final question. What do you want the next audiobook to be about? More on money, discipline, mindset, relationships? Tell me. Because this is not just content. This is a journey. And remember, the lever was never hidden. It was always in your hands. Use it.